Hi everyone. Welcome to my first ever screencast. I'm going to give you a hand in producing this graph from the data that we collected, obviously from the potato estimating osmolarity lab the other day. Our second attempt at collecting data produced better data, I think. So this should look more or less like the data that you guys pooled from the lab. I think what I'll do here with this screencast is I'll do it in a series of clips so that I don't produce one great big giant half-hour screencast for you to watch. And maybe just in this first one we'll do some Excel basics, so we'll get this data table, data arrangement set up. I wouldn't characterize this as being a hand-in ready data table, but it's got a few bells and whistles that I can take you through. If you're a complete brand new newbie to Excel, you'll see a few things here. I'll show you how to put in these border lines and how to merge and center that title of molarity of solutions. Show you how to calculate a few functions like mean, standard deviation, and the 95% confidence interval, among other things. So we'll get started. The data, so when you put our data in, you just type it into Excel, this is what it's going to look like. So I thought I'd start as you're going to start right from scratch. So where do I want to start? Let's put the word trials right there. So that column heading is going to be trials. And I just typed it in and hit enter. In column B here, I'm going to type in molarity of solutions. And obviously that isn't going to fit in that cell. It's going to span over, cell B1. So what we want to do is merge and center that one cell across all of these data columns. So click and drag and over the top there, and then under the home menu area you'll see a merge. It'll drop down here, and I'm going to go merge and center, and it'll move that right across. We'll save these cells for our actual molarities. So that first one is 0.0 m space 0 m. I'm going to hit tab, and it'll just move me out of that cell into the next one. 0.2 m tab, 0.4 m tab, 0.6 m tab, 0.8 m tab, 1.0 m, enter or tab. I don't have a space there, so I just double clicked. I'm going to put a space in between the 0 and the m. Done. Enter. Now let's see. For me in Excel, I always find the default column or row height to be a little tiny. So I'm going to highlight the rows that we're using. And actually I'm going to grab a few more, 3 more down here that we're going to need. And so just highlighted those, and I'm going to right click or 2-finger click if you're on a Mac and go to row height. You can also go up to format here. I think there's a row height under that menu. So row height. Now if what we're looking at is 0.0 or 0.53, I'm thinking 1 will be fine. I'll just type 1, and that makes them a little bit nicer in terms of their height. Grid lines are super simple. Let's highlight all of those rows that we just made taller, and grid lines right here. All borders. I guess they're not grid lines, these are borders. So all borders, there they are. It's getting a little better. Now, it's probably a little small to see, and to work with. So I'm going to zoom it up to 125. actually you can even do this. Highlight that, zoom selection, and then there we go. So we're going to calculate our mean, and I'm just going to type the word mean there. SD for standard deviation, 95% CI, which would be confidence interval. We discussed the other day the concept of an outlier. So this, the data from trial 6, when we eyeball the data, seems to be an outlier. We can Google that word outlier, but essentially it basically means it's beyond what we would have expected from our data. We can see that it doesn't really match up very well. So in fact, there are no negatives here. It just doesn't seem to fit. So I'm going to remove it from our data set. And so I highlight it, as you can see, and if I hover over the border, I'll get a little hand like that. So if you hover anywhere over the border of it, you get the hand. So there's the hand. I'm going to click and drag that out of there. And in fact, I think I'll just put it down here for now, out of the way. And I'm just going to highlight this lower portion of the table, again with the hand, and just bump it up one cell like that, so it's, you know, the table is together. We don't have to worry about 4, 5, 7, 8. This again isn't a hand-in ready data table. We will have to write something about why we excluded that outlier, so that'll come up later. I'm just getting ready to do a graph here. Now when we do our graph, we're going to be graphing, the independent variable was our molarity of solutions, so they're up here. Although with that M in the cell, we won't be able to use those. Excel is not recognizing that as a number for computation, because it's like, what does this M got to do with anything? It doesn't see that as a number, so we're going to deal with that later. We're going to need to calculate the mean percentage loss in, mean percentage mass loss. So we're going to do that. We're going to have Excel do that for us. We're going to use a function. So to do a calculation in Excel, you just click on the cell where you want the calculation to happen, and you push equals. So just start with equals, and that tells Excel we're going to do some kind of a formula or calculation or function. The function that we need is average. So I just start typing average, and there it is. I can click on it, and it gives us the little arrows, and all we're going to do is highlight the numbers that we want it to calculate the average of. So I'm going to click and drag down this column, and then I'm just going to hit enter, and there's our average. Alright, we'll handle these after a bit. The standard deviation, we can do that really simply again. I've got that cell highlighted, so again I'm going to type equals ST, and there's standard deviation. So I'm going to click on standard deviation, and again I'm going to click and drag. Make sure that you don't include that mean, so just our data. So enter, there's our standard deviation. And for the confidence interval, 95% confidence interval, the function is again equals conf, and there's confidence.norm. That's the one you want. There's a few different confidence functions. You want the confidence.norm. And then there are 3 things you can see here in yellow that it wants from us. We need the alpha, the standard deviation, and the size. So the alpha is more or less like we want a 95% confidence interval. So alpha is 100 less 95%. So alpha is 0.05. So the alpha is 5% essentially, and that will give us a 95% confidence interval. So I'm going to put my comma in, because as you can see here in yellow, it wants the alpha, then a comma, and then it wants to know the standard deviation. The standard deviation we calculated, it is right here. I'm just going to click on that, and it says B11, so it knows that our standard deviation is in cell B11. Again with a comma, and then the size. The size is the sample size. We had 8 groups. We excluded one group. So we now have a sample size of 7. So I'm just going to type the number 7. There it is. And enter. There's my 95% confidence interval. Okay. Now we want to do that for all of these solution molarities. So what I'm going to do is highlight those 3 calculated values, and in the bottom right hand corner of any highlighted collection of cells you'll see this little funny little blue square, and if you hover your mouse pointer there you will get this little plus sign. So you'll know you're where you need to be when you get the plus sign, and it's called autofill. So we're going to click that and hold it and drag across, and Excel will be smart enough to know what we want it to do. This is where it reads our minds a little bit. So there it is, and all it really did is, if I click on this, you can see that it's calculated the averages of C3 to C9, and so C3 to C9 are these numbers. So again, it was smart enough to calculate the average of those numbers, and here it was smart enough to calculate the standard deviation of those numbers, and here it was smart enough to do the confidence.norm, and it knows that the standard deviation was in C11, so it figured that out. Sample size of 7, perfect. We've got a lot of decimal places there that we don't need, so I'm going to highlight all of those numbers, and I'm going to go up here to this decimal place area, these 2, so we can increase or decrease the number of decimal places that are shown, and I'm just going to decrease until we get to 2. So everything has 2 decimal places now, and that'll be fine. Okay. Maybe I'll pause it there just to give you an idea what's to come. We're not going to be able to do our graph directly from this data table. I'm going to pull out the means and the molarities of solutions, and I'm going to make up a separate little table over here, and we'll do the scatterplot graph from that. All right, that's good. My first screencast might be done. Hopefully it went well. Thanks for listening. See you in the next one.